Let me make sure this goes to the right stream. I'm not buying it.
You don't want that to go to your OnlyFans stream?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's in SEO Fight Club. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for SEO Fight Club. This week, we are going to talk about Google Analytics lossiness. And so I promised it would be an SEO fundamentals week. So we'd get into something that you could learn how to do and take with you. And so I'm going to cover, what this is and why it's important and how it affects your decision making in SEO. And so we're gonna go over all of that. So with that, let's go through some boilerplate. We don't have Clint at the moment. I suspect he's probably on a business call because I know he's online. So maybe we'll come back to that later in the show. And the SEO video show is an interview show. It's pretty awesome. If you're looking for it, just go to YouTube, search for SEO video show. He gets the best guest speakers on his show. So if you want to figure out how they think, how they did it, what they recommend, it's a great interview show. Oh, here comes Clint. So let me go back a slide. And Clint, are you with us yet?
I think so.
Can you tell us what happened with SEO this week?
No, I was doing an audit. I was doing an audit on a super site, and that thing took up my computer, so I did no show this week.
Oh, but you'll be back again next week, right?
Correct. I'll be back next week. And I have the phone cord, so the call-in system, we're one step away from having the "You're live, caller. What's your question?" So we'll see how that works out.
That's awesome. Then I can call in and say that I'm a first-time viewer, long-time fan.
Exactly.
How many Baba Booies are you gonna get?
I don't know. We're gonna see. I'm gonna play some stuff, and we'll see how it all works out. The hardest part is really because I'm doing the live call-in stuff, is actually staying consistent so people can call in from anywhere. And it also gets syndicated as a podcast, so I got to pay attention to that so that hopefully we can build it up more.
Yeah, I know when Josh used to do his show live, he always had a problem with people hopping on just to show their junk on screen. So hopefully you don't run into any of that.
That has some rating.
That would actually probably boost your ratings. That would boost your ratings quite a bit.
I'm just saying, I would find that entertaining.
So let's see, Lauren, what is going on with IMG? I hear there are big things in the works.
Big things. So tomorrow morning, we have the SEO Mastermind test review. And Ted has recently taken over, though Lee is still very much involved. And we're excited for that. And then Tuesday, we have AMA with Kyle Roof. So that's the evening AMA. And in May, we have two new courses that we're really excited about. Kyle Roof is updating his on-page course. I know a lot of people have been wanting that in Internet Marketing Gold forever. And then we're also releasing a profit stacking course with Olivier, who's doing the live conversion rate optimization project with Andy right now in IMG.
And we have a question. Is the 8 a.m. PST, the Pacific time, the correct time for the mastermind review?
Oh, so we did. It is at 8 a.m.
Okay.
Pacific Standard Time. And we moved that in the morning so that some of the people in the in Europe and such can attend more easily.
Ah, that makes sense. Okay, so 8 a.m. people, rise and shine. That'll be a cool one, because there's been a lot of difficulty getting test pages to index. And so we're trying this new thing where if you don't have tests, that you bring in field observations about what Google is doing right now instead. And so it's going to be cool to see what happens with that format. Also, this last AMA, I was absent, and so I want to apologize for that. My wife had something fly in her eye, and she scratched her cornea, so I had to take her to urgent care, and that's why I was a no-show for the AMA. So I'm very sorry if you showed up for that. If you come to the next one, I'll be there, provided there isn't an ER visit involved. So my apologies again for that. Definitely check out Kyle's AMA if you need something more urgently, or just log into IMG and ask a question. And Kyle, your on-page course. So
Indeed.
that's coming out really soon. Your updated advice on doing the on-page. Is there any secrets you want to tease out on that?
Well, some of the stuff that I did add kind of come from the talk that I did, or that I've been doing on the circuits this year about writing pages that can rank for more keywords by writing pages with sections that are semantically related. I also get into, a lot of it is kind of correcting, or not correcting, but explaining the questions that people ask. Like, there are common questions. They're like, well, what about this? What about that? And I realized, maybe I should just have modules on those. And so kind of some additional explanation to things that, with additional examples on things that are just our common questions that come up when people are doing their on page. And in particular, try to follow some of the advice.
That's awesome. I used to do that same thing with my audits. I used to do my SEO audits as video because I found that my clients would actually consume the whole audit if they could watch it instead of read it. And I told them to just send me, write down all your questions, send them to me all at once, and I'll make one more video where I answer all your questions, and then they'd have it. And so, yeah, that's a cool iteration. Awesome. So check that out. If you're wondering what IMG is, it's courses, it's community, it's events, and it's you can find it at internetmarketing.co. All right, so to our topic. So it's a fundamentals one here. You're going to learn something new because I guarantee like 99% of SEOs have never calculated lossiness in Google Analytics. So I'm going to show you how I do it. I'm going to explain why I do it. I'm going to explain why it's important, and we're going to go over that. So I went into Google Analytics and I found this page on one of my sites that's targeting internet advertising company. And I looked at its stats, and these are generally not stats you'd want to brag about. I have goose eggs and traffic on 2 days for the past 30 days, totaling 8 page views. So, normally not something you'd be very proud of. So, I'm thinking, geez, I'm here in Google Analytics. This thing is horrible. I should probably prune this page. So, Clint, is this something you'd consider pruning?
It depends on what I built it for. But for the purposes of playing along, yes, I will.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's either you redo the content and try again, or you kill the page. But there's actually option number 3, which is Google Analytics might be wrong. And so not a lot of people will question Google. They'll just typically assume that because, they're right in other areas, that means they're generally right in all areas. And that's often not true. So the thing that I really latched onto here was 1 month, 8-page views. I think most SEOs out there would generally say, this is a candidate for pruning. Maybe we update it, maybe we prune it. It's at least a candidate for pruning. And so I want to dig deeper. And so a lot of SEOs also don't realize that their web servers also have log files. So you can compare your log files to Google Analytics. And if Google Analytics is accurate, they should kind of be in agreement. Maybe not 100% agreement, but at least close, within, let's say 25%. That would be nice. So on a Unix system, you typically have to SSH in, that's a remote command prompt, to be able to execute commands on the remote server. You typically have to change directory. Most Unix systems will have the log files in this directory. And then most hosting providers will give you a rolling window of log files because they don't want the hard drive to fill up with stuff you're not using. So on my hosting provider, they give us a rolling 1 month of logs. I can copy them if I want a bigger history. And so they're typically broken up by date. And there will be log files for your SSL requests, your secure web requests, and there'll be log files for the insecure. And so all your traffic between secure and insecure are in these log files. And there's a command you can execute from the Unix command prompt called more, where you say more in the name of the file, and it just spits out what's in the file. And each row in these log files is a request for a document that your web server handled. And so there's lots of different data that are in these rows. So there's what document is requested, when it was requested, what IP address did the requesting, what was the user agent. And you can configure your log files to give you all kinds of different fields. These are kind of just the standard out of the box fields that most people generally get. So the two that we're interested in, I'm zooming in on them here, are the request, so which document was requested, and the refer, so what type of browser did the asking. And we typically want the refer because we want to know, was it a bot or not? The other thing we can get from these logs is the start date of the data. Because it's a rolling window, the very first entry on the earliest file is going to be where our data starts. And this timestamp lets us know how to set the time frame in Google Analytics. So we're looking at the same time range in Google Analytics as we are in these log files. And so that's an important thing to do. And then I go on to use more cryptic Unix commands here. I'm going to explain this. So I mentioned that more just outputs what's in the log files. You can wildcard. So I wildcarded access log, and that will more all of those log files, all the insecure and all the secure ones. So it's going to go through all the lines of all those files. Then there's this pipe. And pipes in Unix are great because they say, take the output of the previous command and use it as the input for the next command. And so grep says search for lines that contain this request. So get internet advertising company.php. So we're going to comb through all the log files and find the lines that are requests for this document. And here in the output, it highlights the matches red on my Unix server. So I can see that all of these requests are for that specific page. And then I can add on to this command. I do another pipe. So I take the output of this grep that got all the lines that matched that page, and I pipe it to the word count command, WC, with the -L flag. That means make it a line count instead. So we got 237 requests in the past month for that page. Now, this still contains bot visits. So I again add to this, I do another pipe, and I do a grep -V, which is a way of saying grep the lines that don't match bot. So exclude the ones that say bot. And that user agent, most of the bots will say bot. So by adding this, we can filter out most of the bots. And so our command becomes the more statement we started with, then we pipe to grep, get the exact page we're interested in. Then we pipe to grep, get the lines that don't contain bot. Then we pipe to that word count -L for the line count. And so with bots, we have that 237. Without the bots, we got 199. Google Analytics said there were 8. So there's still a possibility that some of those lines could be bots that didn't say bot in the user agent. So if I take off that word count part at the end and I go through the results, I can manually review the 199 records and find any bots that I missed by looking at the user agent. So it takes about 10 minutes to manually review 199 lines in a log file. And I only missed 5 bots. So it's these 5. And then other than these, they were all non-bots. So I changed part of my command. So we had this pipe to grep exclude the bot. Now I'm doing it a little bit different. I'm saying pipe to grep exclude, and this capital E makes what you're searching for a regular expression. That means in this part of the input only, these pipes are different. These become ORs. So we're saying exclude lines that contain bot or crawler or OKHTTP or Grammarly. So if it contains any of those, we're going to exclude the line. And so when we correct for the bots I was missing, it gets down to 192. But ultimately, 8 out of 192 is 4%. So Google Analytics is 96% lossy for this page. Most of the traffic to this page, they're simply not reporting on. And there's a lot of reasons why they won't do that. The main reason is that Google Analytics is a sampled logging system. They don't guarantee that they get all the data, and the way it's engineered is physically impossible to get all the data. It's logging via JavaScript, and it's external files that you request from Google. And on slow internet connections, you can actually click a link and be on to the next page before Google Analytics even has a chance to execute. So there's always going to be some percentage of your traffic that doesn't get logged. And maybe it's, people on 4G slow mobile phones. Maybe it's somebody who's having network issues. But there's always some portion of your traffic that Google can't log. And in this case, it's a lot of it. And Google doesn't want to store 100% of everybody's data. They want you to pay, about 150 grand a year if you want unsampled logging. And so if you're on their free product, it's sampled. And so Google Analytics is going to be really good because of all of this. They're going to be really good at answering questions like, what percentage of my visitors are mobile? That's a great type of question that you can solve with sampling. But should I prune my page because Google Analytics only saw 8 page views? That's a bad question to let Google Analytics answer. So Google Analytics isn't great for everything that you're using Google Analytics for in your decision making, especially around SEO. If you're using Google Analytics for should I prune this page, I mean, you're really playing Russian roulette. So I decided to look at the opportunity cost with what was going on with this page. So according to AdWords, the low range on my targeted keyword was $8.70 a click, and the top of it was, $24 a click. So according to Google Analytics, that page was, coming in with $70 a month in value, maybe as high as $200 a month. But when you carry that over to what the logs were saying, the value of the traffic of that page is actually about $1,700 a month in free equivalent ad spend, maybe as high as $5,000 a month. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to cut a page, an individual single page that may be delivering up to $5,000 a month in free targeted traffic. So the difference between what Google Analytics was telling me and what was happening in the log with this page completely changes my decision as whether or not I would prune. And so if you're only using Google Analytics, you really ought to, verify. I mean, at a minimum, if you want to trust Google Analytics, that's fine, but trust but verify, especially when you're doing things like pruning. So the commands I used, if you want to watch some YouTube videos on how to do this, and probably your hosting, if you have a cPanel or Linux hosting, your hosting provider probably has instructions on how to do some of these things. So you could search their knowledge base, and the cPanel might have some ways of doing it. You might be able to download your log files and do all of this in Excel instead. There are different ways you can do this. But the way I do it is I just get a command prompt to the remote server and I use these commands. I just learn how they work. And so CD to change directory, more to scroll through files, grep to find lines that do or don't match things, word count command for doing line counts, and pipes for daisy chaining these commands together to get to answers. And so those would be the things that you'd want to watch some video tutorials or find alternatives to. And, it's important to understand the limitations of Google Analytics. So like I said before, finding out that 50% of our visitors are mobile, that's a great type of thing that Google Analytics can answer with sampling. I mean, that's a great one. But again, making pruning decisions for SEO with analytics, in my opinion, it's kind of like playing Russian roulette. And so, you might help the SEO of other pages, but you don't really know what you're giving up. And when I was in online retail, when I was in e-commerce, I would calculate lossiness every month because I wanted to understand how peak seasons and growth of the company affected the accuracy of the data. And it does. If you're at a successful company with a lot of traffic, your lossiness is going to be variable. And you probably need to understand it so that you can help guide decision making within the business. And at a minimum, you probably want to at least demonstrate lossiness once for your clients, just so they understand the limitations it has for decision making. Burst the bubble that it's a perfect system that they can make all business decisions with, because it's not. An alternative method to what I've shown you would be if you're using GA for conversions or revenue tracking, then you have an alternative you can go to. You can go to your payment processor and compare what Google Analytics is reporting for your order count or your conversion count or your total gross revenue. Because I will bet you money that your payment processor probably has never lost a single penny or misplaced an order. But I'd be willing to bet you that Google Analytics has lost lots of money and lots of orders. And so if you're paying commissions out of Google Analytics, if you're, doing affiliate programs based on Google Analytics, and you probably got some issues in your setup. And when I was in ecom, I did all these methods. Like we had custom in-house reporting. We used Google Analytics, and we had the reporting from our payment processors. We used all three to keep all of them in check. And that was really the best way from a business intelligence standpoint, because we had checks and balances on knowing how accurate our data is and what the limitations of it were. And so that's kind of like an ideal thing you can hopefully get to, maybe if you're an in-house SEO, probably not if you're an agency SEO. But if you work with a big enough client, they may have those reporting systems in place. So at least you know to ask. Now, the best you can get from Google Analytics, the absolute best. All right. So when I was in retail, we paid for the $150 a year unsampled Google Analytics. We got the best consultancy in the industry, and we hired them for 6 months to just work with our integration and to reduce lossiness. By the time you account for, the cost of unsampled GA, the 6 months of consulting, all the internal people's time, from project managers to my time to engineers, we easily put over $1 million into trying to crack this. 12% lossy was as good as Google Analytics got. And it cost us over $1 million to do it. And it didn't last. Ultimately, what ended up happening is that Google Analytics people would say, okay, you're missing orders in your system that we didn't log. You should find those orders in your backend system and upload them so that we have them. And it became this dance where we are constantly scanning Google Analytics for the information that it didn't have and uploading it from our database so that Google Analytics would have it. But at that point, if we have all the good data in our database, if we have all the good data at our payment processor, why are we banging our head trying to get Google Analytics? And as a retailer, we were getting thousands of orders every day. And so we were losing orders in Google Analytics, faster than we could account for. And that's why we could never crack that 12% lossy. We are always making new lost orders. And a lot of the time when you get the unsampled product, a lot of the time they're still sampled. They just let you know when it's sampled and when it's not. And then finally, because I know some people are going to fire back and say, well, I'm killing it with Google Analytics. It works great for me. I love what I'm seeing in Google Analytics. Well, that's great. But your satisfaction with Google Analytics has no bearing on its accuracy. You can like what you're seeing, and what you're seeing can be completely untrue at the same time. So if you're going to fire back that, you like it and that's, proof to the contrary, well, it's not. But, when it comes to using Google Analytics for SEO decisions, think about it, make sure that this is something that Google Analytics is good at answering. And if it's something like, what percentage of our users are using mobile or using Chrome, that's a good thing. That could be answered with sampling. But if it's, should I prune this page based on the samples Google has? That's really Russian roulette, in my opinion. Lee, you're a data guy. What do you think about what I'm saying here?
Well, I think you have to understand a lot about the sampling method, and what you're showing here is that it's complicated to understand that. I was sitting here thinking, okay, I have a website and it's got, just a few pages on it. So if I take the one that gets the most traffic and I find out that it's 50% lossy, is it safe to assume that all of my pages are 50% lossy, or might some of them be 25% lossy and some of them be 90% lossy?
And that's exactly correct, because ultimately what I would do is I would calculate lossiness across all of our pages, across the whole website. But in this example, I didn't want to complicate it, so I just stuck with a single web page. And it happened to be one of the top performing web pages on our site for that particular site.
Right.
And so I knew when I saw the Google Analytics data for it, something was wrong. And there may be technical SEO reasons for why it's wrong. Maybe there are JavaScript errors on the page. Maybe it's not integrated properly. There's some sort of conflict. Maybe there's network or hosting issues. There's a lot of reasons why things can break. In this particular case, it's a static HTML page, and there were no outages. And the log files showed that there were no outages. So it's just for whatever reasons, Google decided not to report on all my traffic.
So if we're trying to make decisions based on the performance of a page, based on the metrics that we most care about, you're basically saying that we cannot really rely on Google Analytics for those sort of decisions.
Well, you at least need to verify. If you're gonna prune a page on behalf of a customer, like if this wasn't an internet marketing page, if this was something related to a law firm's typical client, and maybe that page is bringing in business, maybe it's bringing in lots of leads, and Google Analytics is going to tell you it gets 8 views a month. How much damage would that have done to that law firm if I killed a page that was bringing in quality leads because Google Analytics had the wrong number?
Yeah, but you almost get in a conundrum then. If I'm sitting here and looking and I can't trust the data that Google Analytics and I'm going to have to go verify it elsewhere, I might as well build a solution that gives me the data from elsewhere and just bypass analytics altogether.
Well, ultimately, in ecom, we decided that Google Analytics was really good at some questions and was really bad at others. And what we ultimately found was that having multiple systems allowed us to do checks and balances. It gave us an easy way to say, is this number real or is this number bullshit?
Mm-hmm.
And so it might be that you want to install a weblog analyzer just so you can gut check what you're seeing. It might be that you want to use Adobe's logging solution as well as GA. That way they can both keep each other honest. You might pit logging systems against each other just so you can sniff test the data. Let's see. We have some comments here. Somebody says, Ted, this is too nerdy for most people. Can you get similar information through AW stats? Yeah. Any type of, additional logging system you can implement just to help you gut check your data. Is it in the same ballpark? It's all you're looking for. Because, if it's wildly off, then at least hey, 2-3 different systems did not agree at all on what the correct answer is. And that's important to know if you're making decisions. Carolyn says, so Ted, for clients that complain that their traffic went down, it may not have if you don't look at the logs, right? That's a possibility. Generally, though, if you're seeing a traffic trend in Google Analytics, you will continue to see it, even if it's not the right number. But you'll see that relative traffic trend go up or down based on actual increases and decreases. So for the overall trend on a website, that's generally an okay thing for Google Analytics to answer. Now, the exact amount of traffic you have or the exact amount of traffic you've lost, that's generally a bad question to try to answer with Google Analytics. Let's see. Thane says 96% lossy. That's ridiculous. In my opinion, you're better off using something like AW stats. And, I don't think you have to completely throw it away, but I think if you have a couple logging systems, that's definitely a best practice. It'll help guide you on when the data is reasonably telling you the right answer versus when it doesn't agree at all. He goes on to say you can probably track most things internally. Yeah, I love custom reporting, especially if you're trying to sanity check Google Analytics. It's great if you have actuals. And your payment processor is one example of actuals that you compare against your other logging systems to see how lossy they are. Simon White says we use Clicky and Improvely as alternative analytics. And yeah, there's a lot of solutions out there, so you definitely have choices. There's a question on YouTube about how did Google Search Console figures match to that. I've stopped checking. They've never been close for me, not once, ever in the history of anything. So yeah, I just don't even check Google Search Console anymore for logging data. Kyle, what do you think about all this?
It would seem that if you are going to use Google Analytics for traffic purposes like that, then you definitely want to do something to check the accuracy and see where things are at with your particular site. And if it's really that important, it does seem like AW Stats or Clicky or something like that would be a better option if that's what you need.
And it is sampling, so it might be that Google Analytics is right some of the time, but it's sampling. It doesn't mean they're right all the time. And yeah, if you're gonna prune a page on a client's website, you probably want to make sure. What do you think, Clint?
Well, the question I had is you mentioned the JavaScript firing and it's not firing fast enough, et cetera, and that may cause some of that disparity. Do you think that applies to all the analytics tools that are using JavaScript? Because Clicky uses JavaScript, and they track more traffic than Google does. But could we also have the same problem with the tool like Clicky because they're using that JavaScript?
Yeah. All the JavaScript based systems will have a certain amount of lossiness. None of them will be 100%. But if they're wildly different answers, that at least tells you something. So yeah, that's where we're at with Google Analytics and lossiness. So it's very fundamental what I showed you. I got in, showed you those commands, and the thing you want to be aware of is whenever you're making choices on data, especially choices about cutting pages and things that are good and things that are bad and those types of things that you're making assumptions about based on that data, maybe before you start pruning all those pages, maybe and dig deeper and find out if the data's right. Test your tools before you trust and it may not mean that you have to do it on every single URL you get, but at least be comfortable that the tool is largely telling you the right answer. Let's see another comment here. Fun deep dive. I've started reading logs last week. Yeah. Getting into those server logs, a lot of SEOs don't even know they exist. Like they've never had to work with them. The younger SEOs have likely never even had a need to go explore the web server logs. And there's a lot of things you can do with those. And so a lot of cool tricks you can do, especially when you start looking at the refers and things of that nature. You can glean a lot of information out of those logs. You can even use server logs for detecting when people are attacking your website. It is a direct indicator for negative SEO that if people are trying to do cross-site scripting, SQL injection, login attempts on web applications, all of that stuff appears in those logs. And so if you see people are trying to harm you in those ways, they're probably trying to harm you in other ways too. So you can get advance notice as into when you need to have your guard up, as long as you know to monitor those logs. Awesome. Well, with that, we'll stop here and we'll see you again next week. So thank you, everyone. Is there any final announcements, Clint, Kyle, anything you want to say?